The Beckhams versus the Sussexes. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. You'll be aware from immediate parts passing that there's been a fallout between the Sussexes and the Beckhams. But there is an analysis by Melissa Twigg in The Telegraph which goes into greater detail in terms of a comparison between the Beckhams and the Sussexes, which gives you useful insight as to part of the reason why Harry's wife has failed in the United States and failed so spectacularly, and also that teases out various aspects of her narcissism in action. The headline for the article is "The Beckhams are a salutary tale for the Sussexes." Grafting, rather than grifting, is key in work-obsessed America. But not everyone is successful in cracking the code to winning over the United States. When David Beckham arrived in Miami in 2007 to promote soccer, few felt the Brit and his seemingly fame-hungry wife would make much impact. Harry and Harry's wife, meanwhile, were far more fated than the Beckhams when they first landed on American soil. And already you have that interesting comparison that, in a way, Harry and Harry's wife were lauded, certainly not by all, but by a reasonable proportion of Americans, that they were given, if you like, I suppose if the comparison was to settlers coming over, the Beckhams were given some land which might prove difficult to farm, could be susceptible to a flash flood here or there, that there were harsh winters, whereas with the Sussexes they were given fertile ground, which was free from fierce animals, and therefore of the two fledgling settlements, continuing the settler analogy, the Sussexes would seem more likely to succeed and thrive compared to that of the Beckhams. However, as they are finding out, it's a long game, and the Beckhams are a salutary tale for the Sussexes, who are watching their popularity rapidly fade. There's no doubting it. David and Victoria are thriving. Last Friday represented a pivotal moment. On a hot Florida night, Argentina superstar Lionel Messi lined up for Inter Miami, also known as the side Beckham co-owns. Getting one of the most revered footballers in the world to sign for a US team was a triumph for Beckham and further boosted the profile of Inter Miami. The club, which only hosted its debut match 3 years ago, is now valued at $600 million. It's just one illustration of the way in which David and Victoria have made a glittering success of life in the United States. Not only do they have all the trappings of the American dream, a $23 million penthouse in Miami Beach, Eva Longoria, Kate Beckinsale and Tom Cruise on speed dial, an ultra-close family unit, and billionaire Floridian in-laws, the Peltzes, they also have a real purpose there. Victoria, whose fashion and beauty lines are still considered to be relatively small by US standards, is also seen as a striver. She has grown her brand in the United States by regularly showing at New York Fashion Week. Alan Edwards, public relations expert and founder of the Outside organization, represented both Beckhams in the early years of their careers. He fondly recalls the couple's determined approach to building up brand Beckham, and says he was impressed by their long-term way of looking at things. Victoria was very interested in fashion and determined to build a business in it, says Edwards. She set about becoming a successful designer and building her label with total commitment and passion. David was equally single-minded about what he wanted to achieve. When I first sat down with him in Manchester, he talked about his belief that football would become massive in the United States and also about his passion for the women's game, says Edwards. They've worked incredibly hard to build their success in America and always done things the right way. The growth of everything that they've done has been organic, natural, and above all, authentic. Yes, the use of the word that Harry's wife loves to bandy around. Notice long-term approach. There hasn't been the expectation that it should be given to them on a plate. There hasn't been the expectation that everybody should do as they want. Instead, hard work has been implemented for the purposes of securing those goals. Victoria Beckham, who often gets quite a hard time from people on account of the fact that she rarely smiles and was often not taken seriously. You'll recall that originally she was more famous than David Beckham, and then his fame eclipsed her. And yet she has continued to make a name for herself by working hard with regard to fashion. And whilst he remains the more visible member of the duo, and certainly one which has attracted more attention, she has steadily been slogging away. There is no substitute for hard work. Compare that with Harry's wife, who's essentially lazy. Some narcissists are very industrious, as I've told you before, your glorious narrator being one of them, but many aren't. With that sense of entitlement, the lack of accountability for endeavour, a lack of talent also, often means that the narcissist turns to a grifting approach to get what they require, not caring about how they cut corners, treading on other people, not delivering, shafting people, letting people down, so long as the prime aims are achieved. The building of a brand is more a case of all fur coat and no knickers when it comes to Harry's wife, i.e. it's all show and no substance. With the Beckhams, they've created substance. They've actually built something. They've taken their time to do it. They've got to know people. They've built the networks. Sure, they've traded on their pre-existing fame. There's no doubt about that. It would be naive to think to the contrary. But they've supplemented that with doses of hard work. Harry's wife has not. And therefore, contrasting the fortunes of the Beckhams as against the Sussexes demonstrates that whilst David Beckham is not known as necessarily a bright individual in the same way that Harry isn't, he has rolled his sleeves up and created a football club, invested in it, and has got people involved in that club, which has brought a huge amount of publicity. His wife has continued to slug away, that they have made the connections, and that they've done so, a combination, the utilisation of their pre-existing fame and hard work. They haven't expected handouts, but Harry's wife has, and she has infected Harry with that same mentality. Thus, they've done it in an organic, natural, and above all, authentic fashion. Those three words could not be attached to the Sussexes. The couple were recently accused of being grifters by a Spotify executive and agreed to mutually terminate their $20 million deal with the streaming giant. Archetypes, their only show, was cancelled after one season. They are still working with Netflix, for which they said they would focus on creating content that informs but also gives hope, when they signed a reported $100 million deal in 2020. Thus far, however, all they've released is Harry and Harry's Wife, a not exactly hopeful documentary that mostly saw them complain about the royal family. And this, unfortunately, is the crux of their issue. As the chart-topping sales of Harry's biography Spare prove, the world is fascinated by their gripes with King Charles and the Prince and Princess of Wales, but not much interested in anything else they may have to say. Compare that with the Beckhams, who have rarely publicly complained about their often harsh treatment at the hands of the tabloids, and who are regularly the ones to initiate the joke. Victoria famously referred to her husband as golden balls in an interview rather than be offended by it. India McTaggart, the Telegraph's royal correspondent, says the Duke and Duchess of Sussex gave away their trump card too early in their move to rebrand themselves in the United States, and ultimately what they currently sell is a finite story that appears to be running out of road for their American audience. Meanwhile, the Beckhams built a brand based on decades of hard work in their respective industries. It appears that the Sussexes have yet to find their unique selling point, beside their experiences as former working royals, and therein may lie the problem of what many Americans perceive to be dwindling star power, she adds. It remains to be seen whether they can be retained when they pivot to non-royal related content. I would suggest that they will struggle to do so, because they have no talent. PR guru Nick Eade says that while the Beckhams use their platform for good, and not in a virtue signalling way, the same cannot be said for Team Sussex. I feel that Harry's wife and Harry have not earned their stripes. What have they actually done? He says. What have they brought into the US economy? And while Victoria and David are seen letting their hair down, something that really engages the public, Harry and Harry's wife's behaviour is perceived as elitist and exclusive, Eade suggests. That, of course, is as a consequence of popularity and a lack of. Victoria Beckham and David Beckham, they have their detractors still. There are some people who can't be bothered with them. But they're largely perceived by people in a favourable fashion, that people will say, well, yeah, he was a talented footballer. She wasn't necessarily the best singer in the world, far from it, but she's plugged away with her fashion. They stuck together. They've demonstrated humility. But when it comes to the Sussexes, they're viewed through that lens of unpopularity. They're not liked. They've made themselves not liked because there's an absence of talent, there's an absence of hard work, and there's been this sense of entitlement throughout. Jack Izzard, CEO of Rhizome Media Group, says that the Sussexes' failure to crack America lies in their inability to represent the American dream. The Beckhams embody the American dream in a way that the Sussexes never can, he notes. The Beckhams combine clear talent and prodigious hard work. In contrast, the Sussexes exude entitlement in a very un-American way. That's the ironic thing, because one of them is American. Izzard says that the Sussexes also lack the humility of the Beckhams. David is a goodwill ambassador for UNICEF and has used his star power to do good work. But he never tried to eclipse that charity, whereas, by contrast, the Archwell Foundation feels a bit of a personal flex as much as it's a fundraiser. Good humour rather than a must I endure this attitude goes a long way too. Victoria always knows when to give a journalist a cheeky quote that's not necessarily flattering, but will make a good headline, says another London-based PR who used to live in New York. She's savvy, she has a sense of humour, and uses it to her advantage. People like Harry's wife, who try to control the narrative and only present themselves in a perfect light, forget that the public warms to a humour and the ability to show a flaw. This again naturally identifies one of the problems that Harry's wife has as a narcissist. She needs this control, and the way that she goes about it is to always portray herself as perfect, which she's not, and therefore comes across as not only a lie, but entirely conceited. Furthermore, she has no demonstrable sense of humour. People do not warm to her, and, after a while, they find this taking herself too seriously and absence of a sense of humour far from endearing. This, of course, is being generated once again by her narcissism. The US media had previously been rather po-faced about mocking Harry and Harry's wife, but seemingly found their sense of humour when a South Park episode featured a couple bearing a striking similarity to the Sussexes. America laughed again when comedian Chris Rock mocked the duo in his Netflix special, dismissing Harry's wife's complaints by saying, "Some of that shit she went through wasn't racism, but in-law behaviour." Harry and Harry's wife did not laugh along, and were reportedly so upset by South Park that they considered suing. That demonstrates the absence of humour, how it's deemed as a threat to control, and to consider the threat to sue as a means of nullifying that threat to control. It seems things aren't looking quite so rosy stateside for the Sussexes. According to polling commissioned for Newsweek, Harry's popularity dropped 48 points in the US from December to March this year, while Harry's wife dropped 40. Plus, there is the issue of family values. Showing that you have a good family unit is more important over there than it is here, says the same PR. The Beckhams have been married for decades and are always pictured with their 4 kids and all the grandparents and siblings, while Harry has, as we know, exposed a lot of family secrets. They're now estranged from both relatives on both sides, and this doesn't play well. Equally, for all of their millions in the bank, the Beckhams are often pictured leading relatively normal lives. Where Harry and Harry's wife remain closeted in their elite Monteshitshow community, David regularly buys his lunch from Enriqueta's sandwich shop, an affordable cafe beloved by Miami locals. Most mornings, he stands in line for coffee at small neighborhood joints. Speaking of queues, David won a number of fans when he joined the queue to pay his respects to the late Queen last September, and while nobody would expect Harry to line up to see his own grandmother, there is a sense of entitlement radiating from him and Harry's wife. It was alleged that following the funeral, the Sussexes asked US President Joe Biden for a lift home on Air Force One, a request that was firmly denied. The Beckhams certainly live well, which Americans expect and admire, but also they spend their own money, and that is key, said one PR expert. They're not scroungers, and they never have been. All of this puts Harry and Harry's wife in a difficult position. As the cost of living crisis bites in the United States, it's becoming clearer that their approach has to change. But how do you carve out a successful career when the only thing you're famous for is your family? A useful article which contrasts the behaviours and fortunes of the Beckhams and the Sussexes and demonstrates how the Beckhams have succeeded, whereas the Sussexes have failed. And central to that failure is the behaviour of Harry's wife, and that has been driven by her mid-range narcissism. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.